Well, thank you. Hopefully we're working again. So again, if you talk about planting trees, I would much rather use bare roots than pot trees. Again, going back to what I was talking about, the depth of the rootstock. If we take a pecan tree and we plant them too deep, this is what we end up with. What is the difference between this tree here and this tree here?
Tree on the right is more stable.
Why is the tree in the right, why is that more stable? The root flare at the base is what holds those trees up. If we plant a pecan tree too deep, that grafting is below the soil, we know that the reasons we graft is have mature tissue. We know that mature tissue will not send out roots. So as we end up with trees that go straight into the ground. How long do you think that tree will survive? It's not a matter of if it goes over, but when it goes over. Usually within the first 3 to 5 years, there's no surface roots. And pecan trees, they keep their leaves late in the fall. They've got leaves out there. They've got pecans, and then they tip over. So again, hopefully this will occur within the first 3 to 5 years. Had a pecan grower call me this past fall when I think Michael went through down. He was in outside of Lumberton. He's got about 40 acres of trees, and he lost 6 trees. And he called Mike and says, "What should I do with these trees?" And he said, "Pulling them up is usually not going to do it." He says, "Also, they're planted too deep." At that point in time, it was a no-brainer. You yank those trees out and replant and move on. We have a gentleman over in Wayne County. They were pecan trees, and they didn't understand where that's at. He planted his, and his trees went over about year 15 to 16. That's very expensive. How deep do you plant them? What you're going to do is, if we would look at the root system, I guess there's a couple different ways to do it. When you plant a tree, you've got the rootstock comes like this. It's got a graft union here. Or let's say that's the bud union. The graft union is here. One of the best ways to plant pecan trees, come in and take the top root and just plant the soil comes over, covers the top root. That is one of the best ways to do it. I won't put that in writing much because there's some other things that play into it. But if I was going to be planting a pecan tree, that's the easiest way to recommend it. Because trying to tell, again, the people that you may be dealing with, calling in the phone, there's a good chance they may not have any idea what you're talking about. You start talking about budding or grafting. They may have some idea, but telling them to find the graft union, that could be an issue. So again, you can tell them with a pecan tree, just come in, and when you plant the tree, cover the top root, with soil just to the surface. That should be adequate. Because again, as we talked about, we know that pin, it's mature, it will not form roots. Where apples, it's just the opposite. So it makes sense? Once trees are planted, paint the bottom of them white. This is probably one of the best things we talk about site selection. Remember we talked about southwest injury. We know that southwest injury is always going to be usually on the southwest side, and it's going to be the bottom portion of the tree. Realizing that root, the crown of the plant, if you will, right at the soil line, that is going to be the first part of the tree to lose cold hardiness in the spring. It's also going to be the last portion of the tree to get cold hardiness in the fall. So this is where cold damage is usually going to occur. We come in and paint them white instead of having dark bark that absorbs heat. We have white paint that reflects. This is white latex paint. Use oil-based, you'll kill the tree. Yes, sir?
That answers my question.
Okay. So it has to be light. I've seen pastel-colored orchards. Why would I see pastel colors in an orchard?
Is that what they had left?
You're exactly right. You go to these stores and they've got the most hideous light colors. You can get them for $1 a can. Way to paint them. See these guys, they put on rubber gloves, grab a sponge, and go out there and hit them. If you've got more than a few trees, it's the best way to do that. So we start talking about fruit thinning. You're going to have to thin fruit crops on crop year. I had a gentleman call me 2 weeks ago. He says, "Mike," he says, "I'm hoping," this is Salisbury. He says, "Mike, I'm hoping for more cold damage this year." I said, "Kevin, that's the first time you've ever called me and told me that." Because realizing that we need to thin fruit. And we know that on a peach tree, we're only going to need 12 to 15% of the blossoms for a full crop. The varieties that have been developed in the southeast, that they have a high bloom density. Most full-size peach tree will have close to 25,000 flowers on it. However, we only need 400 of those for a full crop. chemically or hand thinning on peaches is the #1 economic input our peach growers have. I was out at the Sandhills this past week. It took 5 of us basically 4 hours to thin 400 trees. That can be very expensive. So again, we need to thin the crop. For apples, we only need at the most 20% of the blossoms. If we look at an apple, now what portion of the tree are apples formed on for those of you that came to the pruning? That's right, they're formed on the end. That wasn't a trick question. So, excuse me, on the end we've got those apple blossoms. How many flowers come out of that apple blossom? 1. On peaches, how many come out of a peach blossom? 1. But we got those tips out there, that apple blossom comes out, there's 5 flowers. 5 or 6 flowers. Center what we call a king bloom, then there's laterals around it. Realizing that how many of those 5 flowers that we need to have? 1. So at that point in time, it's 20% of the flowers all you need. Then we need to space those fruit out. So again, coming in and thinning the crop is going to be essential. I want to have 4 to 6 inches between fruit on that tree. And then you also want to thin early for optimal size. Again, I'm thinning peaches right now in the Sandhills. I'll be thinning next week in the mountains. Because realizing when those peaches come out, the first growth that comes out is going to be the flowers. The leaves come back after that. So again, those flowers that come out and they're pollinated, where's the food coming from to support that growth? Storage. It's all stored in the trunk, in the root system. That's a finite. There's only a limited amount of carbohydrates that can be stored. If you're going to be putting it into 25,000 blossoms, you're going to be diluting that. But if you come in and thin those down, you'll basically reduce the demand in that tree and increase the carbohydrates that go to those fruit that have been left. Again, what happens if you don't thin? Yeah, they're basically roped down like grapes, and you need to be 6 inches between them, and that's why you get to thin. This is not the way to thin an orchard. So again, this is a commercial grower we had in the Sandhills, and we gave him a variety that had been developed at NC State. It was a numbered selection to look at. He called me, excuse me, one July. He said, "Mike, would you mind stopping by the orchard?" He's just down the road from the research station. I said, "Sure." He says, "I wanted to show you something." He said, we gave him 60 trees. Most growers, they're not going to show you this in their orchard. They're going to drive the opposite direction. So he said, "Mike, I didn't think a whole lot of this peach variety." He says, "Until today." So again, this is the kind of thing, if you don't come in and thin those fruit out, you'll end up with smaller fruit, you'll end up with tree breakage. It's just not a good sign. So again, how do we thin peaches? We do it by hand. We either come in and pull them off. Ideally, I want them pulled off by hand. If you basically, just push them to the side, they come off quite easily. The research station I work at, they like to use wiffle baseball bats. I bought the bats for them. That's the problem. What you do is you can come in and you hit those branches. Because, again, like I said, it costs about $1,200 an acre to thin peaches by hand. So again, we have a limited crew there, so it was this week. They come in and they want to hit those branches and knock the fruit off. My research plots, I will not allow them to do that, but guard trees. Because if you hit a branch, what fruit are going to fall off? The heavier ones. You get the larger momentum, if you will. So again, they're the ones that come off. But this is what the tree looks like underneath. We don't use, that's not a metal baseball bat. It's a plastic one. It was sort of interesting. University Purchasing had a problem paying for baseball bats, wiffle baseball bats. Had to explain it's a practice. So again, we come in, we have peaches here, because usually on an 18-inch shoot, we can have anywhere from 25 to 30 blossoms. So we need to take that down to 3. So we basically see what we took off, leaving one here, and one there.
Do you leave the fruit on the ground?
Good question. Do we leave the fruit in the ground? When we thin like this, we want to usually do it within the first 30 to 40 days after bloom. But the size of my little thumb, if we drop them on the ground at that point, they're broken down. They break down fungi, bacteria, so it's not an issue. That's a very good question, though. They don't harbor insect or disease pathogens. That's a very good question. We talked about this as an apple bloom, if we will. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 flowers on the outside. You notice that one in the center? It's not that developed? It's already done, that's right. So we call it king bloom. It blooms 2 to 3 days before the others. It will give us the largest fruit size. That's the one that we want to keep. However, it's more advanced. So if we get frost or freeze, guess which one goes away? That's one damage. Because apples, we chemically thin. We use hormones that the plant would produce auxins. Do y'all talk about plant hormones? Okay, we heard about auxins. Auxins are involved in apical dominance. We know that auxins can be sprayed to thin apple fruit, if you will. The insecticide 7, carbaryl, is also used for thinning apples off. Because again, like I said, we only need at the most 20% of the blossoms for a full crop.
So do you always take all the ones away but the king one, or do you leave one in case there's a frost? Just saying.
No, when we thin apples, we're usually, we can thin during bloom, both peaches and apples. However, the potential for a frost or freeze after bloom is high. Apples in the mountains, I'm having them thin this week, and I spray them. My goal is to take off basically 80% of the fruit and leave those 20%. Guess how effective we are at that? There's so many things that affect thinning. So again, we try to take off as much as we can, but we really like to have just one fruit per blossom. We may have to come back in and touch up by hand thinning. But again, that's the only way that we can take off crop. Now again, you can come in with apples. If you have individuals, they can come in and you can, if you try to pull these fruit off to thin them, if you pull them to the side, they're all attached to the same point. If you come in and pull them, there's a good chance you'll damage that. So the way to thin apples is come in and grab that stem, if you will, grab that stem with your finger, then use your middle finger and flick off the top. So it just leaves the stem there. Or you can use a pair of scissors to come in. Just make sure your fingers are all the way you do it. But you do need to thin fruit. Because apples, they're sort of like pecans, what we call biennial bearing. They have a heavy crop one year and a light crop the next. Anybody have a Golden Delicious apple tree? Golden Delicious is very prone to that. Has a huge crop this year. And remember we talked about when it's trying to size that fruit, it is also trying to set flowers for the next year. We know that all those little fruitlets are kicking hormones into the tree that are preventing any flowers from forming. So again, that's another reason we thin apples, so that we have a consistent crop year in, year out.
How tall are these trees? If you have to do this by hand, aren't you always on a ladder?
If you're not in a dwarf tree, you're on a ladder.
Against the trunk of the tree.
No, actually, you're on the opposite, on the
Oh,
canopy.
and this kind of ladder.
Yeah. Well, actually, or it's either that, or a ladder that goes into the tree, but you don't go against the trunk. You put it on top of branches. So it's fun work.
You just don't fall off.
That's right.
Oh my God.
Now the equipment, it tipped over. Again, the university.
Get the story straight.
Yeah, the university sent out a blog when I first had the accident, and they said he fell out of a pecan tree. And I was in intensive care, and I saw that, and I had to make a phone call. Let's get the story straight here, guys. so that's right. The equipment tipped over on its side. And I'm not, again, apple trees, again, and that's one of the reasons we're going to smaller trees, dwarf trees. And we'll talk about that in a second here. What do you prefer? What's worse than finding a worm in your apple? Finding half a worm. What's the problem? It's organic, it's apple flavored, it's 100% protein. What's the problem? And what is the definition of organic? What's that now? J carbon? Yeah. How about organic food? Non-GMO? No synthetic pesticides. That's right. What's that? Different. Again, and yes, and I think you hit on it. Basically, organic fruit does not mean unsprayed. And as master gardeners, you'll have the opportunity. Unsprayed fruit is what I call neglected. So again, we talked about you can't grow it naturally. So organic, we're going to spray it. And again, I work with conventional organic. I don't care. I'm a horticulturist. But I do work with organic fruit growers, apple growers. Their costs are about 4 times higher. Just because it's organic, it's non-toxic, right? Oh, come on, tell me it is so. So again, that is exact. They're pesticides. They kill. They may have different modes of actions, but they're still toxic. You don't go out and spray organic orchard with basically Birkenstocks and shorts on. So again, what
Ooh, throwing shade.
What? No. Or spraying over top of your head. I mean, give me a break. People have to understand. Again, and these are things. These are real life situations that you will have to get. You'll get the opportunity with as master gardeners.
So get back in your Prius and try a different line of work.
You ain't going there. So again, what do you prefer? Do we want to work with basically tufted apple bud moth? We've got bitter rot. Guess what apple variety this is down here?
That's a golden delicious, but some all over.
No, it's not a Golden Delicious. It's a Granny Smith. It's covered with sooty, basically sooty mold. Now, if I took a bite out of this apple, guess what that would do to me?
Nothing.
Nothing. Be chalky tasting. No, the pathogens, insects, you ain't got to worry about them. We have other worms here. You can look here. We've got a green fruit worm. This is bacterial spot on peaches. This is fire blight and apple. You eat the tree up. Cat-facing insects, early season peaches. That usually happens within the first probably 2 weeks of the season. What would you prefer, this or this?
Took the guy on the tractor.
Take the guy in the tractor. Look at that. You'd rather a guy wearing a pith helmet, basically a respirator, basically a Tyvek suit, gloves, and you can actually see boots.
At least you get fruit out of the deal.
Oh, what if I told you this is an organic application?
Yeah, there you go.
And that's what it is. Again, he's wearing those things. What he's spraying here, it's basically it's kale. It's kale in it. It's like a. You ever see? You spray a fruit tree, you get that white residue there. That white residue could be on there for weeks. That's what we call a carrier. So this is kaolinite. It's spraying out there. It is a nasty product from the standpoint of inhaling it. It's like inhaling talcum powder. We've seen talcum powder has been written up for other issues. But again, the inhalation problem here, it's not toxic per se as far as the chemical. It goes back to what it does to you physically. So again, if you're going to grow tree fruit, you're going to have to spray most of them. And again, we don't spray because we like to. Spraying is the last line of defense. So we talk about insect and disease management. Cultural management is where it starts. Having healthy plants. We talk about sanitation, get rid of infected. You asked about peaches underneath that are thinned. That's not a problem. That's a good question to ask. You ever see pecan trees or trees that they have these shoots that fall off in the fall of the year? You ever seen these little shoots laying in the yards of places? Again, you go up and look at them. You'll get that as master gardeners. You go up and look. It looks like it's been cut off. What it was, those are called twig girdlers. It's an insect that goes up there. It lays its eggs on the ends of those shoots. It basically cuts off the shoot and it falls. So you've got basically it's distributing its egg mass. So again, getting rid of that, maintain a regular spray program. Again, most of our insects that we're dealing with are going to have 2 to 3 generations. It means that, the first generation, let's say the first generation has 100, second generation has 10,000, the third generation will be 1 million. So again, it builds up. So again, we need to maintain a regular spray program. Because when you spray a pesticide out there, it will probably last, the activity is going to last for 3 at the most 5 days. It is broken down very quickly. It's broken down by UV light. So people say, you say that you're concerned about pesticides on your fruit. No, there's no pesticide there. There may be the carrier, there may be the clay there, but the pesticide itself is not there. And that's important to understand with that. Because if it was still lasting, we'd only spray once and we're good. It's not the case. Realizing that product is broken down, especially with the products we're using nowadays. We're using very specific products for very specific things. In fact, probably most of homeowners will use things that are more toxic than a lot of stuff that we use commercially. So again, because you're using more broad-based, we have growers, we may be using a product, it's what we call an insect growth regulator. You ever heard of Esteem for fire ants? It's a bait. That's an insect growth regulator. It keeps that insect from generating to maturity. We may use pheromone disruption. We will go into codling moth is an apple worm that burrows, the apple worm that you hear about. Our growers will go in and they'll use pheromone disruption. Remember we talked about there's 3 generations that builds up. We'll come in and we'll spray for that first generation. Then we'll put 150 dispensers in the orchard that release a pheromone sex attractant so that we fill the orchard so that the males and females can't find each other, so there's no reproduction. So those things we do. We use computer models. We've got weather stations connected for fire blight. So again, we look at spraying is our last line of defense. So maintain this regular spray program, identify the pest, and apply the appropriate control. Welcome, Master Gardeners. Guess what your opportunity is going to be? Someone calls in and says, I've got this bug eating my apples or eating my roses. Yeah, what is it? What are you going to tell them? Take it in the bag and send it to you. Digital photos are even better yet. But it comes in, you don't have no idea what that critter is. You ever use 7 to control black spot roses? Long time ago? Does that work? Again, most people have a can or a canister of 7 in the garage. Come home and see it, they'll go out and dust their plant. What's wrong with that picture? What's black spot?
What else do my kids have?
It's a fungus. What is 7 Recarbro? Insecticide. So again, it's identifying the critter and then applying appropriate control. And just because it's a fungicide doesn't mean it's to control that disease. But that picture comes in, you don't know what it is. What are you going to do with it? Ashley, that's right. Ashley, that's the first. Yeah, maybe we can take a day off. So again, if Ashley doesn't know what it is, what's she going to do with it? No, I'm a horticulturist. I don't deal with insect diseases. Yeah, that's right. We've got a plant insect and disease clinic on campus. And that's what, if Ashley doesn't know what it is, she'll send it to them and they'll identify it for her. So again, you need to understand what the critter is and then apply the appropriate control. Disease-resistant varieties we talked about, there's no insect resistance for the most part, and they're only resistant to several diseases. That's not a major portion of insect and disease management, except from the standpoint of the root system. We will use that.
Question.
Yes?
So in a way, the cultivars are all GMOs, right? So are GMOs in a way better than non-GMOs because they are
There we go.
protected in a lot of ways, so necessitating less,
Okay.
less pest management?
Okay, now what is a GMO?
Genetically modified.
Genetically modified. And again, that's a very good question. You will be faced with that. Genetically modified. Are we genetically modified?
Yeah, sort of.
Again, it depends on, again, we look at it, we're all genetically modified because we're all a result of reproduction, asexual propagation, gene subrogation. So again, we look at there's genetic differences between my son and myself. There's genetic differences. Actually, I sent my DNA in and it told me, that's sort of interesting. They can identify groups because of certain genes that are same, but other genes that are not. So again, what are genetic, again, if we look at what all the uproar is about, genetically modified is that there's foreign DNA. Genetically modified, all plants, all breeding is genetically modified. We take an apple parent of one variety, we take another apple variety, we cross them. That resulting progeny is different. It is genetically modified, in my opinion. But now what they're saying about the genetically modified, they may use, we look at the row crops, they're using disease resistance, they're using insect resistance, herbicide tolerance, and they're incorporating that into a plant. That's what all the uproar is about.
So that's a good thing.
Is that a good thing?
It can be, but not necessarily.
Yeah. If we will look at what the scientific data shows, it is a good thing. If we don't mind people basically worldwide starving to death, we don't need to worry about that. But we are developing plants. Again, you've heard about people firebombing research institutions that are developing genetically modified. How many of you like papayas? If you're eating papayas, you're eating a genetically modified fruit because the disease came in that they could not control in papayas. We look at tree fruit. For the most part, there are no genetically modified fruit with the exception, there's 3 apple cultivars out now. Arctic, you've maybe heard of Arctic Gold, Arctic Fuji, Arctic Granny. And I'm very disappointed in the company because what they genetically modified, they brought in this, they turned around a gene so that the apples, when you cut them open, they don't brown.
Oh, we knew.
How about modifying so they taste better?
Well, we'll come back to that. So again, they did that, and again, they did it for slicing. The problem is, they didn't give me anything I could take to the bank. I can tell mother, that's fine, you can get this genetically modified organism, it's not going to brown, and you're going to feed it to your kid. That's right. There's nothing wrong with the genetically modified, the scientific data. But if they would have told me I could reduce pesticides, that's a different story. So yes, genetically modified organisms, the way they are now, in my opinion, they're closely regulated and they are beneficial to the society environment. That's not what you're going to read in the public press. You're going to talk about monster genes and that kind of stuff. You hear about monster weeds or super weeds, that type of thing, or super bugs. We can use the human. I guess we talk about super bugs that these bugs that they're resistant. The reason they're resistant is because we use certain products over and over and over. So again, genetically modified with fruit trees, you don't have to worry about it, with the exception of these Arctic, and they're not going to make these Arctic available to the public. Yes, Ashley.
Oh, just a fun fact. In the same way with fruit trees, you'll see on your seed catalogs a lot of times they'll say
Most of our fruit are going to be gluten-free too.
Gluten-free salt.
That's right. No, see, again, that's technology that these companies have invested hundreds of millions of dollars with. Again, we look at a lot of ones now. There's certain products that can spray Roundup over top of these plants, or they've got cotton that basically it produces a pesticide that keeps the voles from there. So again, genetically modified, that's something you'll give. Genetically modified, the data shows that those genetically modified plants are not a threat. And if we expect to have to double our food production by 2050, there's no way it's going to happen unless we're able to do some of those things. You ask what genetically modified for increasing traits, fruit traits, quality characteristics. I would speculate to you or hypothesize to you that the fruit we have is very good tasting. And it's not that we need to develop more fruit. It has to go back to the handling and harvest of that fruit.
Okay.
So, weeds. You're going to grow fruit trees, you want to grow weeds. You got two options. Again, the fruit trees cannot compete with weeds. So we can look at chemical control. What do we call chemicals that control weeds?
Herbicides.
Herbicides, that's right. Now, do herbicides say, well, that's an apple tree. I don't need to, I'll stay away from that. No. Herbicides kill green tissue. Now, there's certain things that will kill them, but again, we talk about painting the base of the trees white. It's basically to prevent that, basically the solar radiation. It's also to prevent from herbicides hitting that tree. Again, we're not spraying it, but there will be drift out of the trunk until that trunk has developed superized. It's an issue. So chemical control, that's what we use commercially. Mechanical cultivation, historically done that. They come out and cultivate down the row, and they cross the rows, and then they swerve and hit and take out 4 or 5 trees. Mechanical cultivation, it tears up the root system. So the roots that we put in the surface that we're trying to irrigate, we're trying to fertilize, mechanical cultivation kills those. And then we can also use mulch. So you put 8 or 10 inches of mulch around the base of those trees, will control the weeds, won't it?
Well,
I see it. Hey, you can't. I see it in landscape services. Those volcano trees, they got all kinds of mulch. If you're going to use mulch, how much do you use? 2 to 3 inches. Enough to prevent moisture loss, enough to keep the weeds suffocated. The other one's to moderate temperature. What's a problem with using mulch?
if it hardens,
What's that now?
Putting it against the trunk.
Put it against the trunk. Why?
Habitat for bad critters.
Okay, insects won't be an issue.
voles.
Voles. What is voles besides the Tennessee football team?
Voles.
What's that? Little bitty mouse. That's right. Voles are mice. There's two that we're concerned about. One's called a meadow mouse, field mouse, lives in the soil surface. The other one's called a pine vole. What's the difference between a mole and a vole?
What they eat.
Moles eat meat, voles eat vegetation. How do you tell the difference?
Size and formation.
So you size and formation. So how many, you go and dig them out, how do you get them to come out for identification?
I know. And your plants are easy to pull up out of the ground.
Like poodles.
You're poodles. Now again, because we're realizing the pine vole and the meadow vole have this very same life habit. You're exactly right. We have to test. We know that voles are basically they eat vegetation, moles eat meat. So again, there's a publication, Vole Control and Ornamental Plantings. There may be in the Master Gardener Manual. What we do is we go out and find those runs. You walk across your lawn and find those squishy areas. Come in and pull up a handful of soil to expose that run. Basically put your finger in, basically clear it out. Cover it with 1/3 of a piece of shingle, something dark. Keep it like that for a couple days. Come back in and drop a 1/2-inch chunk of apple in that run. Come back 24 hours later. If that apple is off to the side, what do you have? Mole. If it's gone, we've got a vole. So again, moles, I don't care. They're going to aerate my lawn for me. That's fine. Voles, 2 voles in the spring of the year result in 1,800 voles in the... So what do you do if you have voles?
Get a permit. Permit hill.
Don't need a permit. Permit till is not the answer. Again, there's up until several years ago, they were protected species. You're right. They are not protected species now. Again, there's 2 ways to get it. One, you can come in and use a trap. They're mice. You can put a trap in that run, basically make sure that shingle has enough dome so that the trap can spring shut. So again, if you've got 2 in the spring, you're trying to control in the fall, how many traps are you going to need? You're going to need a few. That's right. Well, I should tell you this. We had a mouse got into our house, into a pantry, and my wife will not go back into that room. I caught one mouse, and she won't go back there anymore. So
much for cooking for you.
well, I know, that's right. Well, she has me bring stuff out. So again, I'm selling the house anyways, doesn't matter. So again, another way to do it is we can use.
What can we do?
You can use poison. You can come in. There's products out. Again, up till several years ago, they were protected species. There's a product called Rozol, R-O-Z-O-L. It's a pellet. Again, it is the only way you can buy it now is in little pouches. So that can be put in the runs. I would never tell you to open up that and sprinkle a few granules in that run underneath that shingle, because we don't want off-target movement. We're concerned about that. So we can come in, use Rozol. These critters come in, they eat that, and we can hopefully control the populations that way. What you do is you come in and use all those measures, come in 30 days later, throw another half chunk of apple in that run. If that apple is gone, guess what?
Is your yard stinking from the carcasses?
I have never found a vole dead from. Again, we do that, in our commercial orchards. I use some other products that will a little more strong, and I have never found a dead mouse.
It's because the moles are eating.
Well, no, that could be, but I don't think so.
Rat eating mouse out of the garage. Don't trust them.
That's right.
You can use I heard that you could put the hose in your pipe of the car and gas them out.
Yeah. Now, again, be very.
Who's that person that was
Again, some people say you flood them, you gas them. There's other companies that sell. Huh? No. GC fruit gum. There's other places they've got a handle that has a propane cannon. It shoots propane into those runs and you torch it off.
Nice.
Let me say, that is not a recommended practice here.
The meadow vole, does it run as well?
What's that now?
The meadow vole, which feeds on top, does it go through runs as well?
Yeah, the meadow vole lives in the soil surface. I think, and that's what, again, there's a moral for this. Mulching's not going to help with that. The field mouse, meadow vole lives on the surface. It will girdle the surface. And again, the best way to control these critters is natural predators. Using dogs, cats, snakes, that type of thing. I think I probably told you that I had a guy at church and his wife, her raised beds were being eaten up with voles. Basically, Tigger and Puma came from the shelter. They cleaned it up within a month. They had it cleaned up. Then they moved into the house. So, what's that? So again, it's one of those things. It works, but again, if you're going to use mulch on the base of the tree, is pull it back away in the fall of the year. Pull it back away from the tree 18 inches, so that we give natural predators a chance to reduce these populations. So again, if we don't control the weeds, this is the kind of thing we're going to end up with. These are 5-year-old peach trees, Bahia grass, centipede, nimblewilt, and ground cover. Basically, the bare ground was killed completely. These are not dwarf peach trees. These are 5-year-old trees. How much fruit do you think these trees have had on them? None. So again, you're going to grow fruit, you're going to grow weeds. Because the trees cannot compete with the vegetation. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay? What I've done, those are the considerations I think that you need to think about. What time you going to go till? 12:30?
Yeah.
Okay, what I'll do now is I'm going to go through and talk about specific fruit crops that we can grow. And I'll talk about usually 1 or 2 things about these fruit crops I think that are important as we go through. So we start with this. What are some of your favorite apple varieties?
Rayburn.
Rayburn? Honeycrisp? Pink Lady? Fuji? They're all, actually everything you mentioned with the exception of Honeycrisp are all from offshore. Rayburn came out of New Zealand. Pink Lady came out of Australia. Gala came out of Australia, came out of New Zealand as well. Granny Smith came from South Africa. Fuji came from Japan. Macintosh is homegrown. Again, we look at Macintosh. Macintosh it does not grow well here. That was one of my parents' major varieties. It does not tolerate our heat well. But we look at things like Macintosh, Red Delicious, Golden Delicious, Rome. Those are all heirloom varieties. They were chance seedlings found well over 100 years ago. We talk about Pink Lady. Pink Lady is not an apple variety, as we talked about. It's crisp pink. If you go into the grocery store today and look at the lot of varieties that are sold, my wife and I bought some the other day called Snapdragon. It's coming out of New York. There's another one called Opal. There's Pacific Rose, Jazz. If you try to go and find those varieties, you'll buy them in the grocery store, but you'll notice there's going to be a TM. If you try to go buy those varieties, you cannot plant those varieties. You cannot buy them. They are trademarked. A plant patent lasts for about 20 years. A trademark lasts, there's no sunset clause.
What
So,
about Black Arkansas?
Arkansas Black,
Yeah, thank you, Doc.
that's an antique variety. There's no patents on that one at all. It's a unique Arkansas. What's that?
It's a good apple. I've seen it grow here.
Yeah, it will grow well. It will color red here. So you gave me a bunch of varieties, and so I've listed some of these ones here. Most ones we talked about. Gale Honeycrisp is the Yankee that needs to stay north. Came out of Minnesota breeding program. Again, it does not tolerate our heat. In Minnesota, under the best of conditions, they call it a problem child. So again, it wouldn't be one I'd recommend a homeowner plant. Suncrisp made in New Jersey, it's non-browning, it's pretty good. Cameo's a chance seedling from Washington State. It's been out about 20 years, it's good. Again, if you want to plant a disease-resistant variety, Gold Rush is the one you'd be planting. Came out of, there's an apple, Purdue, Rutgers, Illinois. It came out there. It is a disease-resistant cultivar.
Oh, please, I can't remember the brand new I just found at Whole Foods.
Is that Opal?
I don't know. I don't know.
It's black.
No, it does look like it, but no. And isn't it a little bit too, not round enough to be?
No, actually, Pink Ladies are. They're black.
Alright. I've never seen it. You just spread the wax on.
You sure it's not specified?
No, I'm not sure.
Take an apple like that, boy, friends with. It is. Where'd that wax come from? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not gonna eat it now.
You touched it. Again, you come in and you take an apple, you go back and forth.
So the producer puts that on
Isn't that just
shipping.
wax that they install?
It's a edible wax shine. What? Wax makes it shine. Oh, I think it's to protect.
They put it on the shoe.
And buffalo.
Actually, you know
They
what?
do buffalo.
That's natural wax.
From an apple?
You ever take an apple off the tree and you basically shine it in your pants? Why does it shine? You're buffing the wax. That's what we call the cuticular layer. They may or may not have, most of the wax that they put on fruit, they do it commercially, they're going to be more like a Vaseline.
Stick on.
So,
I've never seen
Yep.
it right.
so again, it's one of those things, you're looking for varieties. All that said, those varieties, they're going to have the PLU stickers, there'll usually be a TM on there. Realizing you can't buy a lot of those varieties nowadays.
I just remember, I misspoke about the edible landscape guy. He sprays them with a clay.
The picture I was showing you,
Yeah.
that orchard, kaolin, that's the clay that's sprayed.
Yeah.
The kaolin, I showed you, we've got that, he's wearing that protective equipment. What that does, it's clay. It's a dried clay. It's been baked at 1200 degrees. It goes underneath the shells of the Lepidopterus, the insects that chew and bite. It goes underneath the shell and prevents their populations. But again, the research shows that we only reduce populations by about 50%.
Insect populations?
You did say 50, not
50, 50. So again, if you're getting 98% of your crop damaged, you reduce the population by 50.
Better than nothing.
It's better than nothing, but so is a good drink of water. I mean, I'm not sure it's, again, I've done trials with growers on this. The problem with the kale, and you put it out there, it doesn't come off. And the consumer sees that. We can wash them, we can get it on the outside, but in the stem end, the calyx end, we can't get it out, and you've got this white residue. People get real excited when they see that. Ashley?
Sorry, I'm like so curious about this wax thing. So an apple. I always thought that apples used in the grocery store. Do they have a wax supply or not, or is that a natural thing that comes about?
No, apples coming off the tree will do, that's why I was looking for an apple over there, to show that. No, apples, they have a cuticular, they all have a waxy cuticular layer. That's not going to be the wax that a commercial grower applied. The grower applies the wax. It's applied as a liquid. It's a clear liquid. They run it through a drying tunnel. It would not be solid like that. Anybody ever put Golden Delicious in a crisper drawer? They tend to shrivel up. They've got a cuticular layer. And again, the cuticular layer is several things. One, it prevents moisture loss. And so again, apples will all have a cuticular layer that you can scrape, you can scrape it off. It'll be thicker in some. You ever felt an apple sort of greasy? Again, and that greasiness is the wax, the degradation of some of the waxes.
But this is wax they apply, not the wax that.
No, no.
Oh, it's the wax
Natural.
of the apple.
Yeah, apples will all produce a waxy layer, the cuticular layer.
I'm gonna email you what this is.
What's that now?
I'm gonna email you.
Okay,
what this is.
sounds good.
Check it out.
So, again, there's so many varieties out there. When I was in the hospital, the dean of the college came up with my former department head, and they brought me a basket of apples. And they said, Mike, you have to identify these varieties. And what they had went out, my former boss went out to one of the Whole Foods stores.
Testing you for ability to get your
Well, there's some question about that. But no, again, it was very nice. But again, they brought me apples there were 10 varieties. And they were all basically varieties that are what we call trademark. I hadn't seen half of them before. I got 6 out of them right, so I did all right. But he told me I could keep my job. But again, when you look in the grocery store, it's something you look at. It's changing the landscape of what we sell or what we can buy.
So what do you grow?
So again, what do we grow? There's varieties that we can look at. What do you grow? Again, you listed varieties that you like. You can grow 2 varieties of apples for cross-pollination, and you can put them in a refrigerator. You can store them for 6, 8, 9 months. So you grow what you like. We look at Ginger Gold. It's an early season apple, excuse me, out of Nelson County, Virginia. We've got Red Delicious, Golden Delicious. Golden Delicious picked at peak of maturity. There is no better apple. You notice I said picked it. You liked it? You agree with that? Again, now you've only got about 2 or 3 weeks there because you have to pick it. It softens, but there's nothing better. Gala's a good apple. Rome. We grow a lot of Romes in North Carolina because they bloom late. We look at Stamen. It's an antique variety. You may hear Stamen wine sap. That's wrong. There are Stamen apples. There are wine sap apples. We look at Mutsu, called Crispin. Empire's out of Michigan. Again, you don't see McIntosh, but Empire, it's a cross between a McIntosh and a Red Delicious, which gives us, in fact, that's why I have a home right now. My wife loves McIntosh. We buy Empires, and it's very similar. Fuji, I wouldn't cross the road for a Fuji. I've got research plantings. They're very sweet apples. They're probably 16, 18% bricks. Red Delicious around 10, but they don't have the acid. But Empire, or Fuji, is one of the major varieties on the market now, and it's increasing every year. Suncrisp from New Jersey, I said Gold Rush is a disease-resistant. Pink Lady. Pink Lady would not be a variety I would recommend for a homeowner or limited. They are very sensitive to fire blight. Did I say they're very, very sensitive to fire blight? We've had orchards that we've had to remove because of fire blight with Pink Lady. You got the disease-resistant cultivars, Prima, Priscilla, Liberty. I would put them in the category of dogs. They're Macintosh parentage. They're terrible. They pre-harvest drop the fruit quality, and for the most part, they're resistant to apple scab, maybe a little bit to mildew. It's not a major issue. Then we've got heirloom varieties, Old Southern apples. Y'all have seen that. There's a book out, Old Southern Apples. Lee Calhoun in Pittsburgh wrote the book. Actually, I had to go to Chapel Hill last week. You ever tried to park on campus? Oh, man. I had a parking permit, a handicapped parking permit, and I think I still had to park in Orange County. So again, heirloom varieties. He's written a book called Old Southern Apples, a phenomenal book. There's also a gentleman up in Reedsville, outside of Reedsville, David Vernon, Century Farm Orchards, that he's got about 300 of these varieties that you can buy trees of. So again, heirloom varieties. Now again, they're old varieties. They've been around for basically decades. They probably don't have any insect or disease problems, do they? Yeah, there's no insect or disease resistance with them. There are different intolerances, just like there are with other varieties. But again, heirloom varieties are something to consider. Again, there's others that I don't have up here. That's the one I was looking for. Granny Smith. I don't have Granny Smith up there. The reason I don't is because Granny Smith. What is the fruit of Granny Smith like? It's good, yeah. Why is it good for cooking? Firmness, that's right, because you cover everything. The flavors you cover up with sugar and cinnamon. Granny Smith is, you're buying a marketing. It's a marketing image that you're buying. It's a green apple. It's a sour apple. And I say sour because it's immature. So I wouldn't put it in the tart category. But again, as soon as it starts to get a red blush, it's automatically decreased in grade. Have a grower in Cleveland County. Davis is in, he has Granny Smith. They pick them, usually pick them 1st of October. Says, Gary, leave me a couple trees if you would. He came to a meeting I was at, second week in December, put a box in front of me, says, Mike, this is all you're getting. So we passed the apple around the board table and tell us, what is this variety? I mean, these are all the major apple growers. They couldn't tell us. Again, they were Pink Lady, or they were Granny Smith apple trees picked the day before. They had a more of a squattery apple. They had a red blush on the outside. They had a very complex flavor. So again, Granny Smith, you're buying a marketing image. The other reason I don't have them up there, they grow long shoots and have the fruit in the end, what we call tip bearers. And to make that tree look reasonable, you usually have to come in and cut those shoots back. Guess what? When you cut a shoot back, what have you just done? Cut all the fruit off it. So again, Granny Smith is not up there, but Granny Smith is a variety that we can grow well here. It blooms early, which is one of the major problems. Any others? Well, with apple trees, what we have with rootstock, we have a major, major advantage because we can grow dwarfing stocks. We can grow trees that are full-size 100%, or we have rootstocks that we can grow all the way down. So if we grow large trees, remember we talked about that fertilizer? We have large trees. This is taken in Wilkes County. Look at these large trees. They're nice. It's a well-managed orchard, but look at how much fertilizer we've tied up into the trunk. Also, look at how the work is done.
Yeah, that's not good.
What are these?
These are Romes here.
Oh, they're apples.
No, yeah, excuse me, yeah. So again, these, you can always tell this is a state picture because we've got one guy working, we've got 4 guys watching.
Where's the clipboard?
So, and again, this is why I need to come in and say that, they told me that they found a cure for cancer. And they said, but they couldn't find the source. And I said, oh, really? He says, yeah. He says, they found that a drop of sweat from a state employee will cure cancer, but they can't find the source. And Ashley, all I say is, people, come ride with me for a week and we will show you a different story. I guarantee that. So again, this is the kind of work, again, getting people to do this kind of work, we just can't get it anymore. There is no such thing as there's no such thing as having a shortage of jobs to do, employment. There is a shortage of people that are willing to do this type of work. Because you come in, you climb it, you put ladders, you put a 40-pound pick sack. We just can't get people that will do this work anymore. So that's where we come back in. We're using the dwarfing rootstocks. We come in and what we can grow is what we call pedestrian orchard. There's the conduit here, that's at 8 foot. We can come in and plant trees together. Instead of planting trees, where are we at here? Instead of planting trees at 100 trees per acre, we can come in and plant some of these dwarfing trees here, 8-foot tall trees. We can plant them somewhere around 600 to 1,200 trees per acre.
What's their lifespan?
What is the lifespan? Good question. Usually, we're not too concerned about lifespan. We're more concerned about variety obsolescence. But these things will live 25, 30 years. Usually, we don't usually leave them in. We've got some of these trees that they were planted in 80, 91, I guess.
And is there a difference to the older, large ones, or not really? They all have kind of the same lifespan?
Well, the older trees will live longer, no question. They will live much longer. But what's that? The older trees will live longer. The older, I should say, larger trees. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Don't worry about me. I was just seeing if you guys were waiting. Older trees will live longer. So, again, if we look at it, we come back in. The larger trees will live longer, but usually we're more concerned about varieties becoming obsolete. And the thing is how many of you are willing to climb up 15, 18 foot to prune a tree, 15, 18 foot to harvest a tree? Most of the time, varieties, at that point in time, they're out of reach of people. So again, I would much rather come in and plant a tree on a dwarfing rootstock. Let's say that we plant a large, full-size tree. Let's say that we've got them on a 40 by 40 spacing. So 40 by 40 is how many square foot? 1,600 square foot. So again, let's say I can come in and plant a dwarf tree. I can come in and plant those 6 by 10. How many is that? So in that same footprint of that large tree, how many trees can I plant?
Bunch more.
Yep, yeah. 6 to 7 trees of a dwarf tree I can plant in the same footprint I would of a large tree. That large tree that it's going to take me 5 to 6 years to get fruit off, I will have fruit off my dwarf tree in the 3rd year.
What about volume of apples?
Volume of apples on a per tree or per acre basis. Again, and that's where we need to look at. We look at those small, you get a large tree like that, they can have 20, 22 bushel of apples on that large tree, no question. However, if you've got maybe 100 trees per acre, again, I can come in and put 3 bushel on a small tree and put 1,000 trees per acre. So again, it goes back to productivity on a per unit volume of land. And then we also come back to labor. Yeah. And labor is a killer. Again, agricultural labor is a killer nowadays. To get people to do that kind of work. I have one apple grower, he put out again, in order to have, careful how I say this, basically we have people that, if they're on unemployment, they have to be looking for a job. Growers will come in and they say, I'll give you a job. And again, he had a job fair, he had 200 people basically applied and came in and signed their forms. And he was expecting them to come back. He had 2 people that came back for a job. Again, the first guy quit at lunch on the first day. The second guy quit after the second day. Because, again, it's hard work. It really is. So we start looking at labor as a killer. There's several government programs where we can bring in people from offshore called H2A. Again, and it works somewhat, but it's very expensive for the growers. So I'll stay off my soapbox here. But labor is an issue driving us towards high-density orchards. What is that? Oh, yeah, peaches. So, again, peaches is what we call a showy bloom. As we looked at, remember the prune demonstration, we have blossoms that are very showy. I believe these showy ones are, yes. I did cut them all out, just the majority of them.
We took them home.
Well, moving on. So, again, we look at, this is what we're after. That's what our goal.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite peach varieties? Alberta. Stone-free. That's like saying you like red cars. Freestone?
That's just later in the season.
Yeah, Freestone is not a variety. That's saying like you red apples. Any other varieties? You had Alberta over here. Red Haven, okay. Red Globe. Why not?
The kind that are King's Red and White.
Yeah, Georgia. No.
I never paid any attention.
Yeah, that's right. You don't do peaches. And again, that's why if you're growing peaches, you need to be growing peaches for a specific window. If you get 10 days, maybe 2 weeks at the most out of a variety of peach, you're good. You put them in your crisper drawer. After 3 months, the basic ATF controls that. It's alcohol. So again, if we're going to grow peaches, we need to grow peaches that ripen over the season. But you're exactly right. You know, they don't. They sell Eastern peaches. They sell Freestone, Clingstone, Whiteflesh. Again, they don't sell varieties just because people don't know. However, it is important. Alberta, you won't see Alberta up here because historically Alberta and basically, what was the other one? Georgia Belle? Red Globe. Red Globe's a good peach. Alberta and the other one, Georgia Belle, are somewhat less than stellar. However, if you remember, you get basically 2 weeks out of a variety. On the Raleigh farmers markets, they sell Alberta and they sell Georgia Bells for about a 6 to 8 week period of time. How do they do that? No, actually, they're somewhat less than honest. Because of the name recognition of Alberta and Georgia Belle, they say if it's a white flesh, it's Georgia Belle. It's yellow flesh, it's Alberta. Because we're getting to the point now where we have there's several hundred varieties of peaches. So again, if I'm going to plant varieties of peaches, I'm going to be planting North Carolina. If I'm only planting 2 trees, Contender will be here and China Pearl. Contender will come in 3rd week of July. China Pearl is going to come in about 10 days later. China Pearl's white flesh, Contender's yellow flesh. Those are 1,050 chillers. They will have the greatest potential for surviving. We talk about Red Haven. I've got Red Haven research plots. I've got another one, Crest Haven, that we've got. I don't have Red Globe up there, but Red Globe is a good peach. Again, if you're going to be planting varieties, you should look at varieties that require at least 750 hours of chilling.
China Pearl is the one.
China Pearl is going to be end of July. But again, the idea is if you can plant 10 trees, you plant basically 1 of each to stagger out that harvest season. Make sense? So again, if you look at some of these names here, Candor, Clayton, Derby, Norman, Winslow, Biscoe, those names sound familiar to anybody? Towns, where at?
Biscoes. Over in the western part of the state.
Actually, how about the Sandhill? That's right, Southeastern. Again, these varieties were developed at our Sandhills Research Station. Our research station is in Jackson Springs. How many of you know where Jackson Springs is at? Well, I took a picture of the end. It's my truck. Basically, entering Jackson Springs and leaving Jackson Springs on the same post. It's true. But again, the towns around this area, they're those small towns that they've named them. Yeah. Yep, that's right. You slow down to 60 to go through, Jackson Springs. So again, that's where varieties have been developed. Some of the unique things you want to mess around with, these are what we call donut peaches. They're flat peaches. You've probably seen them at Walmart called Saturn. Again, if you want to do this, you plant one tree, but they're flat. The reason you call them donuts is because, they're flat. You can come and grab that peach. You put your thumb on the top of the pit. You push it through. The pit comes out. It's a squatty pit. And then you've got basically a donut peach to eat. Most of them are going to be white flesh, higher sugar. It's a unique peach.
Slice it in half, put it on the grill.
Well, you can do that.
Serve it with your pork chops.
Yeah, you can do that. It would be very good for that.
Yeah. Grilled peaches are awesome.
So again, that's when we look at peaches. Now, again, the major issue with peaches is going to be peach tree short life. Peach tree short life is when trees die shortly. 3 to 5 years after planting, they collapse. And it's usually going to be a problem on our light, sandier soils. If you're in light, sandier soils, Guardian is the only rootstock we're going to use. We use Lovell and Halford on heavier soils. I've got a major study on biochar and rootstock at the Sandhills. It's down there yesterday, and I have Guardian and Lovell planted within this trial. And I'm already starting to lose trees on Lovell from short life. The trees, they just come out in the spring. This would be the third growing season. They send up blossoms, and then they just collapse.
What is PTS?
Peach tree short life.
Peach tree short.
And what we know is peach tree short life, it's a complex. When we call something a complex, why? Because we don't know exactly what's causing it. That's exactly right. They've been studying this for years, probably 40, 50 years. And we know that it's tied back to nematodes. Ring nematodes in the soil are a predisposing factor. The trees die from bacterial canker or they die from cold injury when neither would kill the tree outright. So again, we know the ring nematodes, so we test for ring nematodes, we treat for ring nematodes, and we use Guardian rootstock.
Hang on, I thought you said when there were nematodes in the ground, when you discover it, then its life's over, it's done. So these are different, and you said there were loads of nematodes, so ring nematodes
Yes.
you can actually treat against.
We can commercially. Homeowners, again, you ever hear clandestine ground up oyster shells? Yeah, hear that controlling nematodes? It's a bunch of hooey. The literature will say that. There's a product out called Vapam. It's available to the homeowner. It's very, very limited in hardware so that you can water that in and get some control. We've done a lot of work looking at brassica plants where you grow them up and they produce cyanogenic glycosides. You can basically grow the tissue, macerate them up, and incorporate them to get some fumigant effect. We've got other things that we can use to incorporate to control nematodes. In my research plantings, I use Guardian rootstock on every planting in the Sandhills, and I also treat before planting with a nematicide. Just because it takes no prisoners. I've lost thousands of trees from peach tree short life in the first 3 to 5 years, and that's just no fun. So again, rootstock is going to be a key factor if you're dealing with your clientele. Again, that's what you have to ask them. How many of you have light sandier soils at your home?
Yeah.
Light sandy soils?
Not around here.
So again, we're on the borderline for that. There's some portions that will have that. So again, that's what you need to ask your clients when you start dealing with them.
So you said Lovell, it was on the previous.
Lovell and Halford.
Lovell and Halford.
Yeah. Rootstock is not as much of an issue when we get into heavier clay soils. Now, where do peaches grow? Are they a southern crop or a northern crop?
Southern.
Of course, that was a trap.
That might be a trap. Actually, when we talk about Red Haven, where's Red Haven from?
There's a bunch of New Jersey trees.
What's that? Where at?
Michigan.
Michigan, that's right. From the West Haven Research Station, we've got basically Red Haven. It's an old variety. Crest Haven, J Haven. We're looking at new varieties now being released. We're coming out of New Jersey. Never let it be said nothing good comes out of New Jersey. They got some great peach varieties.
It's
Again,
Garden State.
what is the #1 peach producing state? Georgia, and that's exactly wrong. No, South Carolina, no.
Michigan.
How about California?
Oh, yeah.
The lands of fruits and nuts, they're number one producing state, followed by South Carolina. Georgia is number 3. So again, realizing that it's not a southern crop. It basically, they like soil of basically sandier soils because they drown very quickly. The problem with we grow them down here, the temperatures go up and down. That tree doesn't know whether it's supposed to grow or stay dormant. So it can be a harsher climate here. They can be grown in a wide range. We grow them from the coast to the mountains. We can't grow them in the upper mountains. It's a bit too cold from spring frost to freeze.
Where do they grow them in California? What part of the state?
Mostly going to be north and central. Yes, sir.
From the chapter in the book, I got the idea that in North Carolina, if you go to the mountains, you can do okay with apples. If you go to the coast, you can do okay with peaches. In the Piedmont, you're just not going to do okay. Is there truth in that?
No, not necessarily, no. Again, we look at the growth conditions. The problem with the Piedmont that we have is heavier soils in some areas, and the frost or freeze gets us. But again, the trees will grow here, but there can be a challenge with frost or freeze being.
So commercially, the Piedmont is not where you want to be.
We've got some commercial orchards in the Piedmont. So,
Growing what kind of fruit?
what's that now?
What kind of fruit?
Actually, apples and peaches. So again, they can be grown, but again, as I said, I talked about the major challenge is going to be frost or freeze during bloom. And if you take that into account and grow them accordingly, I think they can be grown fairly well. Ashley?
I just had a question. So why would you not use Guardian? Like if you know Guardian is the way to go, then why would you even mess around with it? So, like, even if you're not.
Yeah, it's a valid question. There's 2 reasons. One is availability of plants. The other one is that Guardian is a trademark rootstock. It's 75 cents additional per tree. And it's,
For our homeowners, do Guardian.
but again, the problem is with the homeowners, there's a good chance they're not going to be able to find a nursery that will sell Guardian trees. Because it's only going to be a southeastern issue. And they're about 15% more vigorous. So there's 3 things that that can be a problem. So, but
What's the problem if it's 15% more vigorous?
again, they're bigger trees. I'm trying to go to smaller trees. Again, I'm planning a lot of my research in the sandhills. I'm trying to grow a 50% tree that and then grow them as a perpendicular V.
What
So,
do you call vigorous? You're talking about a large.
yes, larger tree. Yes.
What is the percentage of our economy that's based on these fruit trees from North Carolina? What profit is it for these guys to do this? I mean, I'm thinking bugs and nematodes
Yep.
and diseases. I mean, are they shrinking or growing? The growing of our fruit trees.
It's pretty much stable if you look at it. Peaches is about a $15 million crop. Apples are around a $35 million crop, primarily in the western part of the state because there are challenges. There are challenges that, you get out of the Piedmont, there are challenges with a warmer climate, higher humidity. There's more challenges they have to deal with.
Well, it's a little more, I didn't realize it was that much of a commercial.
Yeah, they're both commercial enterprises.
Wow. Wow. Worth it, I guess.
It looks like vineyards are replacing some orchards. Is that true?
Vineyards are on better lands, and so I don't know, I haven't seen any orchards that go out with vineyards, but they'd be in similar places. But the question you have to look at a vineyard, who makes the money in a vineyard? Yeah, that's right. The winemaker makes the money. Usually the person growing the grapes does not. So if you look at a lot of these vineyards going in, it's going to be they're going to have vineyards that they actually process into wine. But yeah, that's a good point. We see, again, the problem with vineyards, you have to be careful that people are buying the hype. Many people that get into vineyards are not established growers. They're people that have made money in other areas, whether it be construction, auto racing, etc. I'm moving on. So we start to... Yeah, that's right. Nectarine varieties. As we talk about, nectarine is nothing but a hairless peach. I do not recommend these for homeowners. We've got this hairless peach. It's got these hairs coming up. Or excuse me, a peach has these hairs. Brown rot is our major fungus problem. It's very aggressive. You wash the peach in the morning, you put it in the counter, it's rotten the next morning. It's a monolinea, it's a fungus. So we get that fungus, it's moved in water spores. You've got this peach with these hairs. That water droplet comes with a spore, lands on those hairs. The sun comes up, the wind blows up, it dries up that water droplet, it kills. Kills that fungus. You've got the nectarine out here, a smooth surface. Water droplet with the fungus lands on the surface. It infects that fruit in a matter of hours. So again, unless you're being on top of a spray program, nectarines would not be something I'd recommend, even though they can be grown. No difference between the nectarine and peach except for one gene.
So basically the nectarines are, they have more pesticides on them than the peach.
They can have. Well, again, we have to be careful on words. Basically, they don't have more pesticides on them, but they have been sprayed more. Okay, and I want to make sure we're clear on that. They will require more fungicides. Now, we've got some new products for brown rot. Brown rot is usually a problem the last 3 weeks of the season. As the sugars build up, the brown rot can become a problem. We've got some products on the market that are phenomenal. They're what we call reduced risk. You can go out there as soon as they're dry. You can go out in the orchard. There's no toxicity issues, if you will. But they're not cheap. They're not cheap at all. But they do work. So, does that make sense?
I thought it was the opposite. I thought a heritage would be more.
Yep. No. So again, moving on, pecans. Pecans or pecans? You remember what I told you about whether it's pecans or pecans?
Yeah.
Well, it's where you're from. That's right. If you're from eastern North Carolina, it's pecans. Other people tell me pecans what they had under the bed during the winter. So I don't know. So again, I call them pecans. Some people say you put them in pie. They're pecans. You eat them fresh. They're pecans. So again, we can grow them in North Carolina. Again, if we look at the scientific name of pecans, it's Caria illinoinensis. There are cold hardy varieties. It was first identified up north. So again, however, the ones that we grow here, we want to grow improved varieties, larger nuts. The ones up north, the cold hardy, would be smaller nut, harder shell, but the flavor would be there. So again, if we're going to grow them, we want to grow basically varieties that I think are larger, have greater market appeal. Now, how many of you have ever seen a pecan flower? What's a pecan flower look like? I had a student in my class do that. That's exactly right. You see those things hanging down? Now, do those, we call those catkins. Do catkins have nuts on them?
No.
That's right. Catkins, yeah, you're right. You get the morphology. Those things hanging down, those are catkins. They release pollen. That's the male flower. Where's the female flower? They're inconspicuous. What was that?
She's the one that said that.
Well, they're inconspicuous. Again, the catkins come out at the end of last year's growth, the new growth. The female flowers that form the nuts are going to be at the terminal end of this year's growth. If you go out, actually they're not out yet, but you go out and look, you can see the flowers there. The problem we have with pecans is called dichogamy.
What? They're confused.
I actually knew that was coming, didn't you? Dichogamy. Well, actually, we have male and female, but the problem is that with dichogamy, we know that the stage of maturity is not uniform. We have some we call, basically type 1s, we'll call those, the pollen is released before the female flowers are receptive. Type 2, the pollen is released after the flowers are receptive. So when you come in, you plant type 1 and type 2s, so you get overlapping bloom period. So it's important to understand that cross-pollination, as we talked about, it doesn't occur by bees, it's by wind. So we need to make sure if we're going to plant, we use type 1 and type 2 cultivars. The white cultivars are ones that we've grown historically. There's some new work being done, releases primarily from Texas and Georgia. These are new varieties that have supposedly an increased resistance to pecan scab. We know that they tried to do some work with breeding, trying to find a scab-resistant gene that they could put into these varieties. However, we found out that the scab that infects a Cape Fear does not infect a Stewart. So each gene is going to be variety specific, and that will just never happen. If you're interested and have clients interested in pecans, there's a publication called Growing Pecans in North Carolina. Have they all seen that by chance?
We have a lot of copies of it.
Okay. So again, that's a publication that you can send to them. Pecans, it's a long-term crop. But again, there is potential for that. But again, that's what we're looking at. And we have, again, we have a North Carolina pecan industry. It's probably about a $12 million industry. And there's a lot of people looking at it. However, when you plant pecans, you're looking at about a 22-year break-even period. So it is, yeah. So again, we have people planning for the second generation. What are those? Pears. What are some of your favorite pear varieties? Bradford. Takes a lot of gnawing on those, doesn't it? Any other varieties? Bosc? Angel?
What are the brown ones?
Oh, the Bosc are more going to be brown, going to be more of a russeted. Well, it depends. There are different ones available. But again, and we'll come back. Again, I want to talk about that because you won't see Bosc, Bartlett, D'Angelo. You won't even see Bradford up there. Because when we're growing pears, what we're going to be concerned about is fire blight. Fire blight is a bacterial pathogen. How many of you have seen fire blight? Master gardeners, you will see fire blight. I guarantee it. Fire blight is a bacterial pathogen, and it comes in, it kills the tip of shoots and moves its way down. And we know that once we see that last dead leaf during the growing season, we know that that bacterium is still within 12 to 15 inches behind it in fresh tissue. So if you come in and cut out those tips into green tissue just beneath that, what have you just done? You've turned your pruning shears into a spreading device. So again, you will see this. Again, it's a major problem. We know that there's 3 things required for fire blight. We need to have a site of entry. We need to have temperatures above 60 degrees. We need to have free moisture, rain or dew. If we can eliminate all 3 of those, we're doing well. Usually bloom is going to be the major point for infection. And that's where we come in. How do you control bacterium? Antibiotics. Agricultural streptomycin. We use it very judiciously because we talk about superbugs, and if we come in and use it, we recommend our growers use it the most 3-4 applications a year because we do not want to develop resistance. And realizing resistance, we're not really developing superbugs, if you will. What we're doing is we're selecting. You know, if we come in, we do the same thing with insecticides or fungicides. We come in and use a product, we knock the hound out of them. We knock them down to 99%. We've got 1% left. Doesn't really cause us any problems, but what reproduces? It's that 1% that reproduce with those characteristics. And that's how we come in. That's why we like to use different modes of chemistry with insecticides or fungicides. With fire blight, we only have streptomycin to control it.
So are pears typically grown farther north in drier areas? Is that
Pears are primarily grown in California, and Oregon, and Washington State.
okay?
For several reasons. Oregon would never be considered a dry climate,
No.
but it's cooler.
Yeah.
And if we get those 3 things, if we can eliminate any of those, if we can eliminate temperature, moisture, we can't eliminate site of entry because flowers are usually where it enters. It's a good question. So again, if we're going to be growing them here, we're going to look at fire blight resistant varieties. We've got, Suckle, Moonglow, Kiefer, Magnus. Those have been ones we've grown for decades here. They are pears, they look like a pear, they sort of smell like a pear, but the flavor is somewhat less than stellar. There's some new varieties. Again, I'm looking at, we have a planting outside of Asheville. We're looking at fire blight resistant varieties that came out of Kearneysville. There's a USDA program there. So we've got some here that I think have the potential. They have the dessert quality, as well as fire blight resistance.
Kearneysville, West Virginia.
There's a USDA research station. There's also a West Virginia, University of West Virginia research station there. So this is fire blight on an apple tree. You will see it again if the leaves during the growing season, the leaves are dead and they're not falling off. They're hanging on the tree. This is fire blight. So again, we can move on. If we stick with pears, how about Asian pears? Y'all seen these before? Yeah, they're round, they're juicy, crunchy. The flavor you have to somewhat, as a grower says, you have to experience the flavor.
Maybe they just aren't that good.
They're not that good. However, again, we've got a couple commercial growers in the Brushy Mountains, Wilkes. We have a guy, he actually has developed a population coming out of Charlotte. He has to beat people off with a stick. He actually, the more you buy, the more he charges you. Because again, there's a huge, basically a lot of this has to do with basic cultural. So again, we can grow them. However, basically they don't have resistance to fire blight. Olympic and Hosui would probably be the 2 I'm growing. I've got 8 varieties planted at the Mountain Horticultural Crops Research Station. We can grow them, but there are challenges, fire blight being the major one. So how do we, again, we need to get those branches down. We can do a lot of pruning with these. He ties them down. He's got a brick out here, ties them down with red string. To get those branches down, instead of pruning them, it basically creates a site of entry for fire blight. It's a major problem. So again, he does very well with that. So we look at the rootstock. Pyrus Calleriana is a good rootstock. How many of you have a Pyrus Calleriana? Y'all seen those before? What are they? What are they? Bradford pears. Bradford pears is Pyrus Calleriana, Callery pear, if you will. They do have fire blight resistance. Some of them have. They tolerate wet soils. So if I was trying to grow pears here, I'd graft them onto a Bradford rootstock. Buy a Bradford pear tree cheaply, come in and put one of the fruiting pears, graft it on top of it. There's other ones we look at. We can look at Pyrus communis. Pyrus communis is going to be the European pear. We can look at domestic seedlings. A lot of times you'll see OHF followed by a number, maybe 97 or 33. And they're semi-dwarfing rootstocks that can be used. And then we can also look at quince. How many of you have had a quince before? How many of you have seen a quince? Oh, that's a good experience. They are a palm fruit in the same subfamily, if you will, of apples and pears. They're very, very astringent. They're very firm, very astringent. It can be used as a dwarfing rootstock in some pears, but there are some problems with graft compatibility. So if you start looking at the catalogs and they call and said, I'd like to grow dwarf pears on quince, I would express caution at that point in time. Figs. How many of you grow figs? Okay, like I said, if you can't grow figs, consider woodworking. Again, they're grown in their own roots. They are cold sensitive though. We get temperatures down around 12, 14, we'll kill the plant back. I always come in and put mulch on the base about 18 inches. If it kills back the top, no big deal. You just pull the mulch back and regrow the plant. Now, how many of you have ever seen a fig flower? You see, where's the fig flower at? The fig. There's a fig, that's exactly right. It's inside the fig. Very good, very few people do that. So again, how many of you have seen the figs we grow here? How many of you have had problems with the seeds? Fig Newtons, they always got seeds that get caught in your teeth. What's that?
They're like strawberry seeds, they're really tiny.
That's right. But actually, the ones we have in North Carolina don't even have that. Because all the fig varieties that we grow in North Carolina are parthenocarpic.
What?
Parthenocarpic. You haven't seen that yet? Parthenocarpy, use that in your next basic Scrabble game. Parthenocarpy is they set fruit without pollination. The figs that require pollination, we cannot grow in North Carolina. The wasp that would pollinate these doesn't survive here. So all the varieties that we recommend, it'll be a very limited list because they have to be parthenocarpic. Brown turkey is one. If I was planting one, it'd be Celeste. Celeste is going to be smaller than brown turkey. It's going to have, I think it has higher sugar content, better flavor. Brunswick and Magnolia tend to crack open. So again, this is what, again, I usually Celeste for brown turkey when people call. That's usually what I recommend. But if we cut that open, look inside here. That is the flower, as we talked about. So again, but they don't set fruit or don't set seeds with this. And because they don't have seeds, part of the problem is they're somewhat sensitive. Seeds are usually the control center of that fruit. It controls ripening, maturity, drop. Without those seeds, figs can be a problem. You'll get people call in and say they drop prematurely before they're ripe. Usually we can come in and tie that. It's too much water, too little water. Shade can be a problem as well. So again, they can grow, and what they'll do is they will start producing fruit where the leaves come off. The axils, that's where fruit will form all the way up the shoot. Usually we'll have fruit in the fall of the year that won't ripen. The season ends before they're ripe. So again, figs are something that I think can grow. You grow them as a bush or as a tree.
What about Cadota?
Cadota, I have not seen enough data as far as its cropping potential in North Carolina. It is a parthenocarpic variety.
Someone recommended that to me.
Yeah, I've never seen it in North Carolina. So, and part of the problem is they are cold sensitive. That's the problem. 12 to 14, we had a gentleman over basically Wilson County, A.J. Board. He was a dentist. He had a fig house. He had 35 varieties grafted onto this plant. And every fall, he would come in and build a big plywood structure around it. He had 7 55-gallon drums full of water inside there, and he basically brought his figs through just from, the passive heating of those drums in the water. So again, do we grow them as trees or as bushes?
Yes.
I don't care. Yes, right. These beside my house, I grow them as a tree. I come in every 5 or 6 years with my chainsaw and cut them off. Because why would I do that?
Bring them down.
That's right. Why would I bring them down?
Because they get too damn tall.
That's right. The fruit's all up here.
Yes.
I'm not about to use a step ladder to pick
Well,
figs.
it's harder to fight all the rest of the creatures that want them.
Well, actually, it's better because it gets me away from the coons and possums up there and deer.
Birds don't go.
Yeah, that's right. Birds do. So again, what I do is I come in. If you cut them off in the winter like this, they regrow, and look at all that new growth coming up. Basically, they will still form figs that year. So again,
That's totally more than what they recommend for pruning most trees. I was trying to.
that's a little more aggressive.
Yeah.
But now what you can do is you can grow them as a bush. If you grow them as a bush, they have multiple stems coming out of the ground. And what you'll do is you'll just select stems. The way you prune those is you'll take out the oldest stems. Every year take out 1 or 2 of the oldest stems. But the problem with those fig bushes, they creep outward. So again, you probably need 4 or 5 foot for them to grow out at least. So again, oh my word, what's that?
It looks like persimmon.
Oh, persimmons. How many of you are familiar with the American persimmon? Oh, Master Gardeners, have you ever eaten a firm American persimmon? You like it? Sort of like sucking on a banana peel, wasn't it? Again, what it is, there's tannic acids within the fruit, and again, the way that they're picked in North Carolina, people they're large trees, so they let them drop and they pick them up after a freeze. At that point in time, the acid's broken down in North Carolina. Persimmon pie, persimmon pudding is basically usually a delicacy for Thanksgiving and Christmas.
They make a beer right over here.
Oh, they do?
It's
Okay.
It's called First Frost.
First frost? Okay.
Full steam brewery. Yep.
Oh, okay. Probably wait until they frost them to use them.
That's
Get the
actually
sugar content.
Very good.
So again, the other one you look at is Oriental persimmons here. They're larger fruited. They're smaller trees. However, they are cold tolerant. 12 degrees will kill the trees back to the ground. If you're going to grow them, we recommend the non-astringent varieties, ones that you can grow and eat when they're still firm. Fuyu, Giant Fuyu, Gyro are ones that we can look at. So again, they can grow. It's one of those things I don't recommend them, probably especially for this part of the state, because they are going to be cold sensitive. The only I've seen more dead Oriental persimmon trees in North Carolina than I've seen live trees. The only 2 surviving orchards I know of are going to be east of here, or east of, basically they're on the coast, Wayne County and Carteret County. So again, they can be grown. So again, this is a pawpaw tree. Pawpaws is a native fruit. If you want to grow them, use a named variety.
Who's the guy?
Where'd you find that Amish guy?
Oh, no. Come on.
I'm just joking.
No, that's Kurt Pomper. He's the director of the Pawpaw Repository.
He's serious about it.
Yeah, he is. He wouldn't let me take that tree. There's a germplasm repository at Kentucky State University. If you're interested in pawpaws, look at their website, Kentucky State University or the Pawpaw Foundation. These are varieties that you look at that are named. There's some new ones out there now that, again, if you look at this is the fruit. They're a native understory plant. If you go out the Outer Banks and find them, you'd find fruit to be about 1/3 the size of this. They're chock full of seeds. With a pawpaw, what you want to look at the pulp to seed ratio. These are the new improved varieties. Notice there's 6 or 8 large seeds. Excuse me. Notice the flesh. So what you do is the best way to handle these is you're going to come in and scoop this out when they're ripe and then freeze the pulp. There are several large pawpaw festivals in North Carolina. There's one in Winston-Salem in the fall of the year. There's one also down Lumberton.
People will do anything to get people to town to raise money. Forgive me, my husband has experience with this, but what do you do with pawpaws?
What do you do with pawpaws? Well, you sell them to upscale people. Now the thing is, this product has been written up more in the Wall Street Journal in the past 10 years than any other fruit crop. It is looked at for its anti-cancer properties. John Hopkins, I think, has studies going on. They're not sure if it's coming from the base of the tree, the bark, the leaves, or the fruit. But it's been written up from that standpoint. The best thing you can do is put them into ice cream. It's very good. It's the only member of this family that's not going to be subtropical. So it's got, again, how many, have you ever eaten them before? Did you like it? Did y'all like it?
We might be able to do another taste test this year. We have a master gardener who has a number of varieties and no hybridizing, so she'll bring them in and maybe we can do a taste test when it's time.
So that's cool.
Oh, cool, we have to invite Dr. Carter.
Gwen Dinson down at Trident Nursery says he's been working with that. I had a variety, I had 33 varieties probably 10, 12 years ago. And he looks at those. So again, it's a unique crop. It can grow in shade. It's got anti-cancer properties. Again, just a couple things. We'll finish up with this one here. Again, this is the purple. It's got a neat flower. They flower before the leaves come out. You've got a purple flower. They sort of smell like dead meat. Yeah. So guess what pollinates? Flies. So again, and they get twin. They have multiple things. They are perishable when they get this point once you harvest them because they get quite a bit of bruising. But again, it's a crop to look at. It's a unique crop. Yeah, it's a beautiful tree. It's got large leaves, oval-shaped leaves.
You had 33 varieties.
Yeah.
And you did what with them?
I bulldozed them out.
Yeah.
Because I had a problem. I had a disease came up, some type of viral pathogen I couldn't account for. But again, it's one of those things that there is a demand.
When you had good ones, what did you do with them?
I gave them away.
Okay.
My secretary almost quit because she hates them. We had other people that they still bother me this day. They like because they put them into, they process them into ice cream.
Where do you buy them?
A good question. Again, where can you buy them? No, for the most part, if you want to get the fruit, you need to buy them online, and you'll have to buy the pulp. Very seldom can you buy the full fruit, just because they're so perishable. They've got this Pawpaw Festival in basically Winston-Salem every year, and by 10 o'clock they're sold out of the trees and the pulp.
Do they go up north?
Yes. They're the only fruit crop that we've talked about today, with the exception of pecans that are native. All the rest of these guys are foreigners. They came in from, again, this is one of the ones that grows from Michigan all the way down through Georgia, usually on the basically the eastern part of the state. Persimmons, the American persimmon may. I haven't been able to chase that down completely. But that's the persimmons. I put the American persimmons. Oriental, of course, isn't. But, yes.
I got some seeds at the plant sale, and I was told by a master gardener that they have to be refrigerated for 30 days before you can plant them and grow. So I have about 10 seeds.
Actually, 30 days is way too little time.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I've got the date
Too
on it.
little.
How long do they have to stay there?
I would probably put them in for 8 weeks.
Okay.
So again, yeah, because they're hard to, again, the problem is they're hard to grow and hard to transplant. And the problem is when you buy seeds, what are you going to get?
I hope I'm going to get what was off of the bush that she
They're cross-pollinated.
Oh. Well, I have enough seeds. Who knows?
Yeah, no, again, and that's, when you look at all these new varieties, that's where they came from. They came from classical breeding, so you may, it's potluck.
It's pop-up?
Yep.
That's what she said when I bought it.
Yep, that's right.
Pop-up.
Well, I'm going to conclude with this. Just one final thing that make you aware of some resources. You can look at my website, just Google Mike Parker NCSU. And what we've got there, we've got all the written publications, but we also have a fairly extensive, basically, video library now. This is planting a peach tree, pruning a young peach tree, pruning a 2-year-old peach tree, pruning a mature peach tree. Those 4 videos alone have had close to 500,000 hits. I don't understand why, how that happens. You get comments left in Arabic, and I have no idea what they're saying. A couple of them I had to put them into Google Translate.
You have people on campus that can help you with that.
Yes.
My daughter.
We do. But then we also have other ones. Caring for stone fruits. This is Lucy Bradley. We talked about pruning the grafting fruit trees. You know, we talked about top working at, what's that? Again, these are all available online. So again, when you have people that call in, giving them resources, I think, would be one of the best things you can do.
Oh, yeah.
So with that, I will conclude. I thank you for your time. You've been very good. You've been a great group to work with. Appreciate all the questions, interactions. And I will stay around. Again, I guess I'm not paid by the hour, so I'll be glad to stay around if you have additional questions. I'll be glad to address them.
Thank you.